we know a bit about how chords are constructed and how they may be used as both harmonic material when all voices sound together, and as melodic material when those sonorities are arpeggiated one pitch at a time, we should explore basic relationships among the different roots of various chords as they work on different scale degrees. Because each tone in the scale can serve as the root of a triad, chords on different roots relate to each other and to the governing tonal context in different ways. Each song has a tonal center, which is the first scale degree. That might be D or C, B flat or F sharp. We talk of being in the key of E major, for instance, when all of the tones of the E major scale, and those outside of it as well, as arranged in both melodic and harmonic contexts, work together to point toward E as a goal. Subchords within the key, with their roots on various scale degrees, have more structural value than others. Some chords embellish others. And different patterns of progression from chord to chord can carry different sorts of functions to either approach the goal tone, or to delay such an approach, or to be indifferent to such goals. The Beatles take advantage of all such types of progressions for a wide range of harmonic expression. First, we need to understand that there are three main functions in tonal harmony, which concept can be defined at this point as chord relationships directed toward the first scale degree as a goal. The most important tonal function is embodied in the tonic triad, the triad built on the first scale degree that's spelled 1, 3, 5. So if we're in this key, there's your tonic triad, spelled with scale degrees 1, 3, and 5. The second most important function is the dominant function, fulfilled by the triad built on the fifth scale degree. That would be fifth scale degree there. The dominant triad, the 5 chord, is spelled 5, 7, 2. The 5 chord points strongly to the tonic because its root falls naturally to scale degree 1. So the 5 chord leads naturally to the 1 chord, dominant to tonic. And that root, the 5th scale degree, falls to scale degree 1 naturally, just as the tonic triad itself is arpeggiated with scale degrees 1 and 5 as its boundary tones. At the same time as these roots relate in a powerful way, especially powerful when played in the lowest register, upper parts convey melodic motion to the first scale degree. Both the 3rd and the 5th of the 5 chord, the dominant chord, lie a step away from the first scale degree and may be imagined wanting to resolve to that tone as if taking us home. So for instance, if this is your 1 chord, here's your 5 chord, and the 3rd of that chord, the 7th scale degree, wants to pull to the 1st scale degree. Similarly, the 5th of that chord, 2nd scale degree, also wants to pull to the 1st scale degree. This is why so many works of tonal music, including most Beatles songs, end with the 5 chord resolving to the final tonic sonority. For instance, a great deal of tension can reside in the 5 chord, and relaxation comes in the 1 chord to which it moves in what we call the authentic cadence, or the full cadence, 5 going to 1. Cadences are conventional harmonic patterns that come at ends of phrases, sections, and entire songs. After the tonic and the dominant, the 3rd central function is the dominant preparation, a chord that typically leads to 5 and may help predict its arrival. There are two triads that serve this function more than any others: the 4-chord and the 2-chord. The 4-chord, because its root lies a step below 5 and climbs easily up to it. So if we're in this key, here's your 4-chord. That 4th scale degree climbs easily up to the 5th scale degree. The 2-chord works as a good dominant preparation, mostly because its root lies a 5th above the root of the 5-chord. And so the root of the 2-chord falls a 5th to the root of the 5-chord, just as the root of the 5-chord falls naturally down a 5th to the root of the 1-chord. In some ways, the 4-chord and the 2-chord are interchangeable, and you'll notice that they both share the 4th and 6th scale degrees, even though the roots are different. So again, in this key, the 4-chord is spelled with scale degrees 4, 6, and 1, whereas the 2-chord is spelled with scale degrees 2, 4, and 6. Another difference between the two is their quality. In a major key, the 4-chord is a major triad, and the 2-chord a minor triad. So even though they often perform the same function, preparing the 5-chord, they do so with different personalities. Many styles of pop rock music make do with only 3 different chords, and when they do, it is almost always the 1, 4, and 5 chords. These are the basic harmonic functions of skiffle music, and so the Quarrymen needed just these 3 chords to play Puttin' on the Style or Paul's own I Lost My Little Girl. One might do with even fewer. The Beatles' cover of Roy Orbison's Dream Baby requires chords built only on the 1st and 4th scale degrees. But Twist and Shout is the quintessential 3-chord song. It is an almost endless repetition of 1 moving through 4 to a tension-filled 5 over and over again. The same can be said of Words of Love, a long loop of 1, 4, and 5 chords. Rock and roll music uses these same 3 chords, but is a little unusual in that it begins with a 5-chord. Its verses moving 5 to 1 to 4 to 5, ending on that 5-chord. When we end a phrase on 5 like this, it does not reach its goal, and so we have what we call a half cadence. The song's choruses begin on 1 and move 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. Listen to rock and roll music and see if you can hear where those chord roots appear. See if you can follow these same chord changes to different rhythms in One After 909, Lonesome Tears in My Eyes, I Got a Woman, and I Forgot to Remember to Forget. A song from 1967, All Together Now, is very unusual for the Beatles in that period in containing only 3 chords, which is one reason that children's song seems so simple and related to the band's skiffle roots. In Youngblood, our simple 1, 4, and 5 chords in verses and choruses contrast strongly with the more strange and demanding chord functions appearing in the bridge. This is because the song's more straightforward harmony captures the singer's primal leering fixation on his female quarry, whereas the unusual chords of the bridge portray the unwelcome and surprising complications that result from the singers meeting the young lady's protective father. The fourth chord also has a function other than preparing the dominant. It may also be used as an embellishment to tonic. This can have a gentle quality because the root and third of the four chord will fall by step as upper neighbors to members of the one chord. So if this is your one chord, the four chord is spelled like this, and the root and third of the four chord lie just a step above the third and fifth of the one chord. 1, 4, 1. This gentle 1-4-1 relationship is heard throughout Mother Nature's Son, and it's part of why that tune has such a gentle, rural, pastoral quality. Usually a song will end with a structural 5-1 conclusion, but sometimes more is required. That authentic cadence might lack authority for some reason, needing more information before we can end. Or at the other extreme, sometimes the authentic cadence carries so much pent-up energy that it spills over into further music. So we might have a second chord progression after the authentic cadence. A 4-1 close can help dissipate any leftover energy. This final 4-1 ending is referred to as a plagal cadence. So we have available an authentic cadence where 5 falls to 1, a half cadence where a phrase is left hanging on 5, and the plagal cadence where a 4-1 ending softens any edge following a possibly weakened authentic cadence that has already taken place. This is best exemplified in the end of I Want to Hold Your Hand, which ends with bass and guitars playing octaves establishing the fourth scale degree, while John's and Paul's vocals sustain the first scale degree in 2 different octaves, while the bass finally retires, falling from the 4 chord to 1. Plagal cadence. The fourth type of cadence introduces a chord built on the 6th scale degree. When a phrase ending 5 leads not to 1, but to 6, the listener has been deceived, and so we have the deceptive cadence. The 6th chord contains the 1st scale degree as its third, and so it acts in a way as a substitute for tonic, but one that is not quite right. The 1st scale degree goal may be reached melodically, but it is not supported by the right sound. Instead of being a major triad built on the 1st scale degree, it is a minor triad built on the 6th scale degree. We referred earlier to the minor versus major contrast in the introduction to Do You Want to Know a Secret? That song gets a lot of its mysterious quality and an essence of subterfuge from the deceptive cadences that haunt it regularly. Note how the second verse moves deceptively from 5 to 6, and then guitars drop a 5th from the 6th chord to 2, preparing the 5 that makes the half cadence and the turnaround to the bridge. Two different deceptive motions from 5, the first traditional and the next more exotic, give the phrase endings of P.S. I Love You the quality of an afterthought following a failed attempt at arrival, which is just about what the singer's letter contains, a reference to an inability to return home right away, followed by a postscript motion that closes the distance. So the two different deceptive motions from 5 to a diatonic 6th chord, and then from 5 to a chromatic flat 6th chord that has to pass through flat 7 to find its way home. So see if you can determine where in the song these chord changes appear. When the 2 chord falls to 5, which then falls to 1, we are traversing the circle of fifths. One can begin anywhere on the circle, progressing with roots in descending fifths, and as the listener gains recognition of the underlying scale, the tonic chord becomes more and more inevitable as the goal, as the sonorities progress from minor tones on the 3, 6, and 2 chords to major triads on 5 and 1. Note that an ascending fourth in the bass line takes one to the same scale degree that the descent of a fifth would accomplish. They are equivalent. One may traverse the entire circle, falling in fifths and rising in fourths in alternation. Among Beatles songs, this occurs only in one minor key example, You Never Give Me Your Money. Its minor mode colors will sound very different from those of a major key, but the functions and the drive to the tonic work the same way. In major keys, the Beatles rarely progress from further away in the circle of fifths than 2, 5, 1, as they do in approaching full cadences in the second line of the bridge of Thank You Girl, also in the introduction to I Remember You, the first 3 chords of All My Loving, and twice in each verse of Devil in Her Heart. Anna is unusual in running the string to 6, 2, 5, 1 at the end of each verse in quicker harmonic rhythm than previous lines, changing chords twice as fast. In a number of songs, the Beatles draw thirds of chords from outside the scale to create a chromatic 6, 2, 5, 1 progression with major triads only. The 1, 6, 2, 5 progression is called the rhythm changes after the classic Gershwin song I Got Rhythm. When the rhythm changes are expressed in major triads only, we have a sound that's characteristic of some of the oldest songs in the Beatles' repertoire, Sweet Georgia Brown and Shimmy Like Kate. In Sweet Georgia Brown, we actually begin with a chromatic major 6 chord, the root of which falls a fifth to 2 for a chromatically major 2 chord. The 2 chord falls a fifth to the expected major dominant chord, and that falls a fifth naturally to the 1 chord, which is immediately undercut by a chromatically major 3 chord, which falls a fifth to set up the chromatically major 6 chord that begins the next verse. The rhythm changes with all major triads is the basis of the bridge of Cry for a Shadow, of the original bridge of Hello Little Girl as taped in 1960, and of the repeated outro of 1963's Little Child. It remains for us to see about a few patterns based on the minor pentatonic scale, particularly when major triads are built on any and all members of that scale. Typically played in parallel motion, it is like the chords represent a thickened melodic treatment of the scale, doubling the melody's string of roots with their thirds, fifths, and octaves. Often, segments of the minor pentatonic suffice, especially including the 025 subset. Major triads built on roots with the 025 relationship form a common blues rock marker. Now you recall the sound of the 025 as in the main riff of Money. So if those three pitches are doubled with major triads, we have this sound, the first three chords, some of them repeated, in Tony Sheridan's Y as accompanied by the Beatles. And that takes us to the opening of Some Other Guy. And John Lennon took that for the opening of his own solo hit, Instant Karma, in 1970. There are other well-used segments of the minor pentatonic used as roots thickened with major triads. John took the flat 3 to 4 to 5 to 1 progression from Carl Perkins' Lend Me Your Comb, and we know this added a touch of blues to Please Please Me. All 5 members of the scale serve as the 5 roots in the verse and chorus of Don't Bother Me, but not all 5 are filled out with major triads. It's the first scale degree, in fact, that supports a minor chord. Those last 3 chords, by the way, a plagal cadence with a minor 1 chord followed by a major 4 chord and leading back to a minor 1, exemplify what Frank Zappa called the Carlos Santana secret chord progression. And it's emblematic of this song's tendency to inhabit the Dorian mode, a topic for a later video. So let's recap what we've learned here in terms of chord relationships. We defined 4 cadences: the authentic 5 to 1 cadence, the half cadence that ends on the dominant, the plagal 4 to 1 that often softens an authentic cadence, and the deceptive cadence 5 to something other than 1, usually to 6. We saw that simple pop songs are often restricted to the major triads built on the 1st, 4th, and 5th scale degrees, but that even early in their career, the Beatles are drawn to the minor 2, 6, and 3 chords. We then mentioned the circle of fifths, in which roots fall in a chain of descending fifths, and the use of members of the minor pentatonic scale as roots of major triads for blues-based progressions.